Hey, we're going to look at working with negative exponents today. And so all a negative exponent does, it doesn't mean it's a negative number. What it means is that it's going to take it and make it the reciprocal. So on your TI-84 calculator, it's that x to the negative first button. So doing a negative exponent really just means we're making it the reciprocal. So what it looks like as one of your laws would be that if it's a to the negative something power, we put it into the denominator and change it to a positive. So a couple different ways to think about it. On number one here, if I have 5 to the negative 4 times 5 to the third, I could think of that as saying, well, that's 5 to the third over 5 to the fourth. And we really don't want to have to multiply that out and then simplify from there, because I get 125 on top and an even larger number on bottom. So we can think about that as doing 5 times 5 times 5 on top and 5 times 5 times 5 times 5, so 4 5s on the bottom. And when I do that, 3 of those cancel out, and I'm left with just 1. So I would have 1/5. The other way, of course, to think about that is using my order of operations, the PEMDAS, and I've got 5s with exponents that I'm multiplying here. And so when I zoom into those exponents up top, then I'm adding those together. And so I do negative 4 plus 3 would give me a 5 to the negative first. So if those combine, ends up as 5 to the negative first, which, to the negative first, there we go, which turns into 1 over 5 to the first, or just 1/5. So either way of thinking about it works. With number 2, I've got 2 to the negative third, then 2 to the second power. So what I can do, since it's an exponent to another power, when I zoom into those exponents, those are going to multiply together. And the reason those multiply together is because it's saying, an exponent is something to a power, meaning I multiply it together that many times. So if I have 2 to the negative third to the second power, really that's just saying I'm doing 2 to the negative third times 2 to the negative third. And so multiplication would take it to addition, and I'd add those together. But all that's really happening is I'm multiplying negative 3 and 2 to end up with a 2 to the negative 6th power. And so what I do from there is I'd take that and I would do that as 1 over 2 to the 6th power, and then I'd just do 2 to the 6th power, which would give me 64. So just remember, none of the numbers there were actually negative, just the exponents, which gives me a reciprocal, so puts it underneath that fraction bar into the denominator. So what we start to have happening here is we get more and more negatives. We can think about it as going ahead and switching those around first. So you might think about it as taking 8 to the negative 9 is going to go to the top and be positive, these two, and we can go ahead and combine those and say negative 5 plus negative 3 is negative 8. So if I have 8 to the negative 8 over 8 to the negative 9, let's go ahead and swap those and make them both positive. So I'd have 8 to the 9th over 8 to the 8th. And then my subtraction just works out a lot easier. Do 9 minus 8, and I end up with just an 8, because I'd have 8 to the first power on top and 8 to the 0 power on bottom, which is just 1. So 8 over 1 would give me that 8. Other way to think about it is I could go ahead and do negative 8 minus negative 9, and if I did it from there, I'd end up with 1 over 8 to the negative first, and that would swap that way. You could also, from here, actually write out 9 eighths on top and 8 eighths on bottom, and cancel them all out and just have 1 left. And so when I've got, on number 4, 5 over 4 to the negative third, I'll take and distribute out that negative 3 to both of them. So 5 to the negative 3 over 4 to the negative 3. And so all that'll happen is those will swap, giving me 4 to the third on top and 5 to the third on bottom. And then I just need to cube those. 4 times 4 is 16, times 4 would give me 64. 5 times 5 is 25, times another 5 would be 125. So I want to say those are will not simplify, because the only thing that 125 will divide by is 5, and 64 does not divide by 5. So you end up with a larger fraction, but that is okay. That's how it works out. Okay, looking at the back of the notes. Now we're adding in some variables here. So I have 2x cubed to the negative second power. So let's go ahead and distribute that first, which would give me a 2 to the negative second power times x to the negative sixth power. Then I can take and put those into the denominator, which would make them both positive. So that'd be 2 squared x to the sixth over 2 squared. Then that's all I've got left to do. Doing 2 times 2 would give me 4. So 1 over 4 x to the sixth. And that would be as simplified as I could get for that one. Okay, now we're getting into my larger ones with some more variables. And so what I would do on this is, let's take first and do a little bit of organization here. And so when I've got all these negatives, what happens is I've just got all of these numbers kind of out of order. So first, I'm going to take and see if there's anything that'll simplify on here. So 3 and 6, for instance, I know that those numbers will simplify because they can divide, and I just get a 1 and a 2. Now once I've got that, then I can multiply my coefficients together. 5 and 1 just gives me a 5 on top. Then 8 and 2 give me a 16. So that takes care of my numbers now, my coefficients. Then I'm going to take, and everything else I'm just writing down as it is. The only thing I'm going to do is, if it's negative, I'm going to move it to the bottom and make it a positive. So that x to the negative fourth, I'm going to move to the bottom, becomes x to the fourth. Then y to the third gets to stay up top. x to the fifth is going to stay down at the bottom. X to the negative third, I'm going to move to the bottom, so it switches places and becomes x to the third. Y to the fifth stays up top. And y to the negative fourth was on the bottom, but I'm going to move it up to the top and make it y to the positive fourth. So it's not always going to work out to where you have all your y's up top, all your x's on the bottom. That's just for this one. But we would normally do some canceling out if we can. On this one, it looks like all I can do is, since these are all multiplied together, I will add up my exponents here to get what those are equal to. So 5 over 16 does not simplify. And I have y to the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Y to the 12th. And x, 9, x to the 12th. So that gets that as simplified as it'll go. 5y to the 12th over 16x to the 12th. Okay, looking at the next one. And do the same thing. I'll see if there's anything that can simplify. And looks like right away 2 and 6 can simplify to just a negative 1 and a 3. And 4 and 12 be 1 and 3 there. So my coefficients first, I have a negative 1, and 3 times 3 would be a positive 9. Now I'll go and do the same thing with my x's and y's. X to the negative 6th is going to move to the bottom and become positive. Y to the 4th gets to stay up top. X to the negative 3rd is going to move up top and become positive. X squared gets to stay up top. Y to the negative 3rd would move to the bottom and become positive. And y to the 5th will move to the top and become positive as well. Okay, so from here, I can go and combine and subtract if you need to. We could go and write out everything individually. So negative 1 over 9. And I've got, let's do my x's first. I've got 3 up top and 2 more. And I've got 6 on the bottom. For the y's, I've got 3 y's on the bottom. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this way allows me to real easily cancel out, make sure I don't make any mistakes. Also a lot of writing though, so I would go and cancel those out. Say, oh, looks like there's 1 x left on the bottom, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 y's left on the top. That works out the same way if I go through here, cancel out a little bit. Of course, you can say, well, there's 5 there, 6 there, so there'd be 1 left there. 4 and 5 is 9, minus 3 is 6. But I'll break that apart and say, if I combine those, that's x to the 5th, y to the 9th, over 9, x to the 6th, y to the 3rd. Then they're lined up, and you can subtract them very easily that way. So that left me with 1x on the bottom and 6y's on the top. So either way, more than likely you're going to combine some of those steps, so it's a little less writing, but that gives you each of those steps as you go. And the last one on this, I'm taking my exponents first, so let's go ahead and do this. This y to the negative first here, I'm going to go ahead and move and say, instead of doing that there, I'm going to move that there. And I have a z on top and bottom here, so let's cancel out that z and make that to the second. So I have yz squared on the bottom and x squared on the top. Okay, and so that would be x squared or y z squared. And that's all to the negative second power. So when I do that, that's going to cause everything in here to be negative again. I just simplified it a little bit beforehand. That way there's not as much work to do. So that would give me x to the negative fourth over y to the negative 2, z to the negative 2, or z to the negative fourth, sorry. And basically everything will swap upside down just to go ahead and get me in the right format. So as we're doing that, let's go ahead and do our big long line here. And so x to the negative fourth moves to the bottom and become positive. Y squared goes up top, and z to the fourth up top. So that takes care of this whole half. And I know I'm working a little bit backwards here, it looks like, but I'm just dealing with this exponent first before we do anything else. Then I'll take and fill in the rest here. So x to the negative 2 goes to the bottom and become positive. Y cubed stays up at the top. And z to the negative 1 goes to the bottom and becomes positive. Then x to the negative 3 goes to the top and becomes positive. And y squared gets to stay at the bottom. So I've got everything now in the place where it should be. And all I'll do is combine and then cancel out if I can. Okay, now that I've got it organized, I can see that I have a 3 and a 6 for the x. So my x value would leave me with 6, 5, 4, 3 on the bottom. My y value would be y to the third up top. And z would be 4 minus 1. So z to the third on top. So a few steps, but really the math there is just adding and subtracting and using those negatives to move it from the top and bottom. So as you work through it, it gives you some good steps. Again, you might find ways to shorten it, and if you need to go back to writing out the individual letters of all of it, that way you can cancel them out. That's always an option for you as well.